Just to introduce myself, yes, my name is João Fernandes. I'm a senior member of CERN staff for the last 25-ish years, and I've been doing several things related to innovation and innovation with industry, including coordinating a few projects between the public sector or big science public sector and industry. So today what I'm going to do is, and it's a very good introduction that we had here with this previous discussion, because yes, apart from introducing you to CERN and to what the fundamental challenge that we have and that drives innovation, drives all our research program in the lab, I'll then try to give you some examples of the technology innovation that we have achieved in partnership sometimes with external institutions and with external companies, and give you specific examples of some of the mechanisms that we have been using and that we are going to continue to use, and try to give you an idea of what are the benefits and the impact for both sides of the equation. It was very nice to have the Mentimeter in the beginning, because we saw the word profit, we saw the word money, we saw the word innovation, and it will be nice to try to understand and to delineate how these impacts are coming across. So just introducing to CERN, if you don't know it, probably you know, we are a laboratory for particle physics, the biggest in the world. What you see there is a map from the Geneva area, if you've not been here. So in Geneva, so you have the airport there, and then the big ring that you see is the Large Hadron Collider, our flagship experiment. And so our goal is to understand the most fundamental particles and laws of the universe. So the research program is around one of the biggest flagships projects, the LHC. And we are an organization that is more or less global, in the sense that we have member states, 24 countries that you see there, but we have essential collaborations across different countries in the world in different status, depending on what the country collaboration or the country contribution can be. This moves around 15,000 people, staff people, that is always based in Geneva, but then we have also graduates, students, associates that come and spend time at CERN from their universities and from their research institutes. As I mentioned before, so the LHC is our flagship, currently our flagship program. So it's a 27-kilometer synchronous that you saw before in that map, with 100 meters, that is 100 meters underground, and essentially accelerating particles and colliding them close to the speed of light. And so these collisions are producing essentially, so the LHC produces essentially 1 billion particle collisions per second, and this produces a lot of data, as you can imagine. So we are on the range of 1 petabyte per second of data. And then if you think about those 4 points that you saw before, these detectors that are trying to understand different parts of the physics program, they are essentially cameras that are taking pictures to these collisions. And so we are capturing, because the technology that we have now captures about 1,000, but most of them are discarded as well. So this starts to connect me to the digital part of the program and how we deal with all this data. So currently what we have is something that we call the Worldwide LHC Computing Grid. So essentially a 30-year project that is storing, distributing, and processing all this data that is produced. Of course, this is evolving now, because the new phases of the LHC will produce 10 times more data, and this is going to start in a 5 years time period. And then we have also other future studies for what is going to be the next generation of accelerators. And so when we talk about all this data and all these challenges, we of course start to talk about how we can have innovations that drive these challenges. So one of the examples that you probably know more is the birth of the World Wide Web. So this was driven by a need to share information. This happened when Tim Berners-Lee was at CERN 30 years ago. But then we start to have more, and many of them are already with a very big impact on society. One very close example is accelerated technology that are applied to radiotherapy and to medical imaging, for example. And they'll all come from they're all spinning from the accelerator technology that is in place. But there are more. There are more. You see there 4 examples. The pixel detector as well, used on high-resolution 3D color X-ray, or even on everything that relates to machine learning. So, for example, we have developments on FPGAs that are also being applied by companies, in this case, to autonomous driving software. And when I go back, when I link this with AI, AI now is getting very, very, very reinforced in the way that we are doing research. We have 3 examples there. For example, the machine learning that is being done at the experiments, and that will spin in terms of applications for the control rooms that we have for the accelerator, or even everything that relates to prototypes that we are trying to do for massive machine learning analysis, because as you probably know, machine learning is very hungry in terms of infrastructure, in terms of resources, but how we are going to distribute this across member states in different kinds of infrastructure backgrounds. For example, it can be cloud, can be on-prem, can be an HPC center. And this is another prototype that is going on. And the third example that you see there is more specific to what we call reinforcement learning, that is reinforcement machine learning, that is delocated machine learning, that is also being applied not only to optimize our particle beam steering that you saw before, but also to domains in healthcare, and specifically the Cancer Research Institute and the medical supply chains in the WHO. This was to give you a bit the big picture, or the contextual picture of what CERN is doing in terms of innovation. And now I'm going to bring you some examples of the mechanism, because we also thought, and I think I saw some questions there about the mechanisms that we use to make innovation, and specifically in the industry. The first example that I give you is the archival project. So this was an EC-funded initiative for archiving data preservation of data at scale. So the idea, we had already preservation services on industry, but also in public sector and on the research sector, but we didn't have yet preservation services at the scale for example, those 4 labs that you see there that had public organizations that had specific scaling or big science requirements. It was CERN representing one science, that was high energy physics, but also DESI in Germany representing photon neutron sciences, EMBL for life sciences, and PIC in Barcelona for everything related to astronomy. And so the idea was to do what we call in this example, what we call a pre-commercial procurement. So what is a pre-commercial procurement? So you are not buying from the companies a product that exists. You are buying from the companies co-development work to achieve a service that can be used by the end of the project. And for that, we have been partnering, the 4 of us, the 4 institutions that you see there, putting funds together, but also having a clear set of rules for competition. So we have different phases where we scope the R&D across the 4 organizations. So you see what you see in this slide here was scoping in layers from layer 1 to layer 4 in terms of requirements. And then on the other side, what you see was the use cases that these 4 organizations had brought into the project and fit in the scope of the innovation R&D, and tested the innovation R&D across the different phases of the project. Essentially, in 3 years, we had an architectural phase where we developed a common architecture. In the second year, we developed some pilots, and on the third year, we expanded to more production-like environments. So this is one of the ways of doing that we are doing R&D and innovation R&D with companies. So the results were, we had 2 SMEs in Europe, LibNova in Spain and Archiving in the UK, that came with, that achieved the last phase of, if you call it the Hunger Game. So they passed all the phases of the project and arrived to the end with services that fit the testing and fit the all validation that the research organizations have done. So this is one of the examples. Another example, sorry, and it was something that was appreciated by the community because we also got an award on exactly how to collaborate and cooperate with industry and across big science. Another example that I have for you is what we call the CERN quantum technology, and this one is much more focused. So this is our program to quantum and how to apply quantum to energy physics, but also how to spin the applications and the gains in innovation from the application of quantum energy physics to the rest of the world. So the QTI is organized in 4 different areas. So it's a 5-year research plan that is organized in 5 areas. So you see 4 areas. So you see there things like technology platforms. This is going to be hardware, and this is the physical hardware that we have there. Networks and communication. So it's also an area where quantum is very prominent. And then everything that relates to quantum computing and algorithms and development of hybrid solutions. When I say hybrid, it's between what we call classical computing and also quantum computing. So the way the QTI is organized is again in a way that can bring collaboration and can bring innovation with industry. So there is a framework hub. So CERN is always on the driving seat on these things, of course, because it's a CERN it's a CERN hub or a CERN made hub. And inside this hub, we have projects that can be either public or private, where we are going to fit R&D projects that align with the overall objectives of the QTI. So it's not only a question of, okay, let's do something for the sake of doing it with a company or with an university. Let's do something that is completely aligned with the objectives that have been defined for the 5-year research program. So, and this has several advantages because apart from providing a unified framework for these projects, because we don't have, like this, we don't have different projects popping up in different places. We have a clear separation with what is a commercial relationship or a contract with a company for providing services, and what is an R&D collaboration with a company on a specific subject. Okay, so that is one of the first advantages of a construct like this. And then, of course, this facilitates all the coordination of projects across, because the rules of the game are very clear for the private sector. And in our case specifically, we have a team for IP protection that establishes the rules of the game from day one. So when a project is signed, it's already been validated in terms of what are the IPs that should be in place and how the interests of, in this case, CERN are protected in case of some IP pops up and needs to be shared. Okay, so all this, and I think we talked about this before. So all these things need to be all done before we engage with industry, because of course one of the main drivers is profit, and if the rules of the game are not transparent and clear from the beginning, things can get complicated. So to wrap up a bit what I just said, and I hope I still have a few minutes. I try to divide here what are the benefits for both sides of the equation and the multiple benefits. So one thing that we saw from the private sector, and I'm not from the private sector, so I'm talking on behalf of the companies that we work with, they appreciated the access to cutting-edge research. So for them, this is a clear advantage when they have access to research workloads or research data sets that in another way they will not have access to, apart from having a contract with a specific organization. This boosts innovation on their side because they see a different set of people bringing ideas on their products, on their product lines, on their roadmaps, and also helps them to de-risk and accelerate time to market. So for example, on the archival project, some of the companies that reach the end of the project, they claim that their product would be as advanced as it was only 5 years from that moment, if they didn't have participated on on the project. So there is a de-risking factor for them and an acceleration for participating on these kind of initiatives between science and them. For us on the big science side, or on the public funded research, if you want, we can translate these in more practical applications. So these requirements can drive products that then can have a wider application. We also enhance technology transfer between both sides, and we start to address more concretely or more tangibly what challenges sometimes are in the society, trying to solve major issues across both sides. And then I think one of the main advantage here, and I think the resistance is starting to go down as we go, is this building of these innovation ecosystems where we can really connect entrepreneurs or people that sometimes comes out from our domain, from the research domain, from the universities and research labs, and from SMEs and from companies that are completely aligned in terms of expectation with the requirements that public funded science can have. And I think, Garrett, I think this is what I had. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
I'm just checking now if there's any questions, so I'll give it a moment from the room or from online. While colleagues are thinking about the question, João, I maybe have one question. So CERN collects a phenomenal amount of data. I know they even destroy huge amounts of data from the collisions, right? So I'm guessing now it's over 500 petabytes of data in total that you have. And if I've understood correctly, so far CERN has opened up around 5 petabytes out of that 500 plus petabytes of data, right? So my question is, how realistic is it to actually open up this data? You know, how difficult is it to open up this data? And I see Baden Mons has joined us listening in, so I'm also wondering how well described is the metadata on that data? For instance, is it fair? Is it beyond fair? Is it less than fair? And what does it require to do this? Because people talk about being open, but it costs time, effort, energy, resources, right?
Yes, it does. And so I mean, there are several aspects there. Yes, the data is produced, but there are several stages for the data to be open. So we have embargo periods from the experiments. And this is why? Because it needs to be scientific validated what are the outcomes of this data before it gets open. And this is one of the parts. And then yes, we have the open data portal where data is put publicly open there, but it's not structured. That we have still a lot of work to do in terms of how to structure metadata and data. And we are trying to do the best as we can inside. We have to also remember that our main mission is high energy physics. So so we need to be, of course, we try to get tools and reproducibility software that can be applied worldwide. To other data sets and to other domains, but it's a process, okay? And there's still a lot of things to do. So one of the big, I think, gains that we had in the last years that we established now a concrete and official policy for open science and open data at CERN across. So we have now a set of, let's say, best practices for open science, because this is also something that is cultural on our research side. Okay, so sometimes being open, since you are in competition for funding, since you are in competition for results, is not seen as something that should be done, you know, widely. But now the processes for research are being encouraged to be, you know, open by this new open science policy, and also the facilities now are being encouraged to be open. Okay, so I think it's a path. We gave the first steps, I think, on this, but there's still a lot of things to do.
Thanks, João. And just a pushy question. So I'm aware that CERN has massive storage capacity, number one, to accommodate for all the runs of the LHC. And a lot of that storage capacity thus can be used for other purposes, like services, for instance, like Zenodo, right? And then you also, of course, have many applications or programs or services yourself for, first of all, I guess, for the particle collider community, but secondly, that could be relevant maybe as a type of horizontal service or generic service for others, right? My key question here is, and you said some of it, why? Why would CERN go to the trouble of doing that? It's not, as I've understood it, really for profit purposes. So why would CERN go to the effort of trying to engage the community, of trying to give out more of that data, of trying to use or have their services used, not just by their own community, but by other communities?
No, I think so. I mean, there are several dimensions to that question. So one of them is our mission. The CERN's mission is everything that we do should have a profit on society. Okay, and everything that we do should be made available to society. And then if you think about, or at least I think about the term open science means doing it with the other research sectors as well, and with the other CERN domains. It's not open science cannot be open science if you do it only on a silo scientific domain. Okay, now there are again several steps to do that. We are taking the first ones. You mentioned about Zenodo. Zenodo, yes, is being used by several research domains and several universities and research labs that are not connected to high energy physics, but we are really at the limit of what the mission is, because Zenodo was the purpose of Zenodo was, and it is, in terms of funding and in terms of mission, mainly to high energy physics. So we need to find the ways and find the mechanisms to how to expand Zenodo that becomes something that already is doing that, but can scale to even more of what is doing. So, but this again, it's not only technical. It's very much about what are the let's say the funding conduits, and also how you map it across the mission of CERN that is very clear from the beginning that is in high energy physics. I hope I answered to your question.
Thanks, João. And I see Barend has his hand raised. Barend, if you can open your mic and just quickly introduce yourself as well.
Yes, yeah, Barend Mons, advisory committee, I think, and one of the persons behind the FAIR principles, and of course that's where I want to make a comment. I'm not saying that it was explicitly said, but what you see all the time is when FAIR comes up, people start to talk about open data. And that is one of the most common misperceptions about FAIR. FAIR data is not necessarily open. The metadata can say, for example, the EMBL part of the project, many of the data cannot be open. They have to be very strongly protected. You see that 23andMe is going bankrupt because they didn't do it and they had everything central. So there's one thing about FAIR. And the other thing is that there is not a direct correlation between the size of the data, like the famous peta and zettabytes. It's much more the complexity of the data that is important. So you can have very simple data that are petabytes and petabytes, and the metadata are very simple. We are just measuring this and we see nothing for 2 years and then the boson comes by. Or very complicated data on biology, for example, my field. So it is not for nothing that I think 14 of the principles are about metadata. And the data, also Zenodo came up, I couldn't care less where data are, because the data are too large, too sensitive, and so to move. So we are moving to data visiting, where the algorithms visit the data and they need very rich metadata to reuse the data. So metadata is minimally as important as the data themselves. And the metadata being fair is almost more important than the data, because you could even say it's just images or whatever, so they are not fair, but machines and people at least know that. And then you know how to run an algorithm on the data or whatever. So let's get these two things very clear when we talk about fair. It's not the same as open. And it is not more difficult to make large data sets fair than small data sets fair. It's all about the complexity and ambiguities in the data set. If you have 5 different definitions on BMI, then you have a much bigger problem than a petabyte of data that are very uniform.